So I'm not sure if it's stupidity, immaturity, or arrogance, but one of the most naked expressions of global north neocolonialism comes from one Elon Musk.
No, that was fucked, but I was actually talking about this. We will coup whoever we want. Deal with it.
Now, Musk might have the vibes of a evil 14-year-old who's been bigged into the body of a 53-year-old man, but with his short-sighted, fully exposed greed, he reveals here one of the most violent dimensions of current green transition politics: green colonialism. I probably don't need to talk about the scale of global climate catastrophe, right? Almost every state in the world at least acknowledges that global warming is happening. Almost every state, I guess.
When I hear these people talking about global warming, that's the global warming you have to worry about. Not that the ocean's going to rise in 400 years an eighth of an inch, and you'll have more seafront property, right, if that happens.
And even stalwart institutions of the liberal global regime, like the World Economic Forum, are recognising the dire impacts of global warming on the world economy. Some states are trying to decarbonise economies. Some action is being taken in some places. Yet, all the while, Trump is saying shit like this.
And you'll have more seafront property, right, if that happens.
I wish I had a big board that I could crash through like like H-Bomber guy. I could just play that clip, I guess.
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
H-Bomber guy needs the exposure. But don't worry. I've not secretly become an apologist of the effectiveness of liberal global regimes. That would be a bit of a heel turn. The collective and individual actions of states to combat climate catastrophe are not only not enough, but they're crucially caught in a web of neo-colonial capitalist logics. Global South states are frequently blamed for not doing enough.
The vast majority of emissions are not going to come from US or other rich, well-meaning Westerners. It's going to come from China, India, and Africa.
We have to do something about other continents. We have to do something about other countries.
Fears of global population control are projected across the world.
Mass population growth makes life worse for pretty much everybody.
It was the growing human population that was the worst problem, destroying the forests in this area.
And colonial market extraction is still the defining feature of climate action. So while there's increased talk of a just transition to a global green economy, Europe and the global north as a whole are far more concerned with energy security and maintaining the global extractive regime. So in this video, I'm going to draw especially on the various authors and essays in this book, Dismantling Green Colonialism, to talk about how green colonialism is becoming an increasingly dominant feature of global politics. As climate catastrophe becomes even harder to deny, capital is shifting from strategies of denial to strategies of incorporation. The concept of a just transition has become increasingly dominant in environmental politics.
It's being called a just transition.
A just transition.
The just transition is
just transition.
How do we create new economic opportunities and ensure a just transition?
It's the idea that the transition from a fossil fuel economy to a renewable one must be inclusive of the people who may be harmed by that transition. And in the case of the global north, this was often framed as making sure fossil fuel workers can be transitioned into new jobs in the renewables sector.
A just transition describes the process of rebuilding a community in a sustainable way after losing a polluter and job provider.
Progressives will use a Green New Deal framework to argue that the massive investment in green transition will create a new green industrial revolution with mass employment and, like FDR's New Deal, improve the conditions of workers in those industries. But this narrative has some issues. Firstly, green industrialism is not as labour-intensive as 20th century industrialism. It won't lead to the mass employment within the global north that the New Deal relied on. And that's, we can't build a politics on poor foundations. We can't build off of sand. The second problem, though, is that like the New Deal, and like the post-war welfare states around the global north, Green New Deal politics often don't account for the global networks of colonialism that are being upheld by the green transition. That is, often a just transition is spoke about in relation to the workers in the global north, while excluding the extraction of the global south.
It's being called a just transition, ensuring workers aren't left high and dry as Canada moves away from fossil fuels.
It's like when Social Democrats idealise the welfare states in Britain or Europe without acknowledging that, in a direct way, the money which funded those welfare states came from colonialism. So that sort of narrative is just written out of history in a way that Green New Deal politics kind of can reflect sometimes. Global warming continues to especially damage ecologies and livelihoods of those in the global south, despite the fact that not only is the global north responsible for a vast amount of historic emissions, most historic emissions, and not only that, but the kind of economics from which those emissions sprung still structure the world. That is, fossil fuel capitalism established the system in which flows of wealth, resources and value are extracted from the global south and funneled towards the global north. And this results in a kind of differentiated standard of living and rates of consumption. For example, the average American currently drains as many resources as 35 Indians and consumes 53 times more goods and services than the average person from China. And now obviously these kind of abstracted averages obscure certain realities of the continued imperial regime. Like, for example, there's segments of both Indian and Chinese populations with loads of wealth who consume a lot. And similarly, within states like the US, Canada, Australia and others, there are settler colonial dynamics whereby indigenous land is expropriated by the state or decimated by corporations in the name of extractive profit.
The U.S. cavalry chased the people into this area right here where the mine is being dug up at the moment, and they were massacred. It's a tragedy. It should be deemed a historical site. That should stop the mining altogether.
Beneath the sagebrush here could be one of the biggest lithium deposits in the world. This is Thacker Pass, and in March, work began on getting it out of the ground.
Which is to say that this easy structure of global north and south is more of a heuristic shortcut with many exceptions rather than a firm analytical rule. But regardless, what is clear is that the causes and impacts of global climate catastrophe are unevenly distributed between what we can broadly call the global north and what we could broadly call the global south. But as certain climate mitigation strategies are beginning to appear, what's becoming horribly clear is that these systems of neocolonial extraction and exploitation are not being challenged, but being reinforced for a new green world. For a very famous example, coltan mining for electronics is notoriously destructive, while the mining of lithium in places like the Lithium Triangle in Bolivia, Argentina and Chile for the use in rechargeable car batteries or electronics is a site of notoriously harsh colonial dynamics. The threat of Evo Morales nationalising lithium mining in Bolivia was enough for Elon Musk, with that, vibe of a absurdly cringe 14-year-old on a Call of Duty voice chat, to declare, "We will coup whoever we want." This was a call nakedly for the pursuit of profits for his electric vehicle production. It's really annoying how cringe he is. I hate that our Nazi overlords are so cringe.
The left wanted to make comedy illegal, Like, you can't make fun of anything. So there's like, comedy sucks. It's like, nothing's funny. You can't make fun of anything. It's like, legalize comedy. Yeah. I am become meme. Yeah, pretty much.
Opening up Bolivian lithium mining to international capital was, of course, a key part of the brief far-right coup in the region. This is just one example, but it is indicative of a trend in global political economy. And on a slightly different level, patterns of international finance and debt obligations are continuing to structure extractivism in the global south, now in the realm of green transitions.
If you go back 10 years, for the most part, financial policymakers weren't thinking about climate change very much. So what you're seeing in Washington at the IMF World Bank meetings are a series of discussions between central bankers, regulators, investors, big financial institutions about what next.
Despite the fashionable narratives around the apparent death of neoliberalism, when we look at the ways in which the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are using financial tools to continually impose structural adjustment programs and debt regimes and austerity on many global south states, we can see neoliberal dynamics still very much at play. These mechanisms aim to open up such states to private capital investment, which is tightly associated with the extraction of value, resources, and energy. These structural adjustment programs also include programs of de-risking. This isn't about the de-risking of potential negative environmental externalities from business. Let's remember this is the real world.
Try to join the rest of us in reality, Brito.
But rather is de-risking for finance. This means that states bear the financial burden of potential losses, not private finance. So if a new radical government comes into power in a region which has been subject to significant private finance investment in, say, mineral extraction, and they decide this should be nationalised for the benefits of the people of that state, then private finance investors can sue the state in what's called an investor-state dispute settlement. Corporations can sue states for billions of potentially lost future profits in a move which could obviously cripple smaller economies. Even the threat of this action is enough for some states to back off taking radical action which benefits their people rather than Western private finance. And such patterns of private finance and liberalisation are a clear feature of continuing neoliberal and neocolonial world orders. For another powerful example, we can look at Senegal. Senegal in West Africa was part of French-occupied colonial territory until 1960. But since its independence, it has remained subject to neocolonial dynamics. France still claims to have a special relationship to Senegal, which I guess is true if by special you mean fucked.
I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who have not had the courage, in the eyes of their public opinion, to bear it. None of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
From the 70s to the 90s, 90% of foreign finance in Senegal came directly from France. Turning to the energy sector, we can see the exact finance dynamics that we'd expect. The energy and renewable sector has been progressively privatised due to demands from the World Bank and from the global north investors, including those from France and now the US. This is just one example of neocolonialism as described by Kwame Nkrumah. The essence of neocolonialism is that the state which is subject to it is, in theory, independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system, and thus its political policy, is directed from the outside. While Senegal has formal political independence, webs of international finance are dictating its state economic policy for the benefit of global north finance and energy security. And these green colonial dynamics are also really clear in the production of renewable energy, particularly in the Middle East and North Africa region, the MENA region. This has been inflected by a pursuit of energy security, particularly by the EU. On the one hand, this takes the form of familiar security paradigms to stop flows of climate migration in the name of security, but also means expanding renewables production in key areas despite the wishes or the interests of local populations. And this often reproduces these classical colonial understandings of the MENA region. For example, the current representation of the North African region Sahara as a vast, empty, dead land that is sparsely populated and thus constituting a golden opportunity to provide Europeans with cheap energy so they can continue their extravagant consumerist lifestyle and excessive energy consumption. What's crucial, however, is that this dynamic of cheap energy is consistent across both fossil and renewable energy regimes, and indeed, the boundaries between those two are often quite porous. For example, a lot has been made recently of the green potential of hydrogen as a replacement for fossil fuels.
Hydrogen has been hailed as a fuel of the future that could help end the world's dependence on fossil fuels and aid the transition to net zero emissions.
But one of the major sources of hydrogen is as a byproduct from oil extraction, which has led to support from European oil and gas companies who see it as a sort of backdoor into maintaining or even further expanding their operations in the MENA region. And this really highlights the sort of porous boundaries between green and fossil fuel industries and the tenacity of extractive colonial dynamics. They're not just disappearing because fossil fuel needs to be replaced or because we need green energy. They're, in some cases, intensifying. Even when we're talking exclusively about renewable enterprises, the colonial dynamics remain. One of the major projects of European green energy security was the Desert Tech project, which was a project initiated in 2009 by a series of European firms and financial institutions. And it aimed to fuel Europe with the creation of a massive Saharan solar farm and, wind farms expanding across the MENA region. It was supposed to provide Europe with a massive 20% of all of its energy by 2050. But notice how this apparent developmental boon for the MENA region was underpinned by a logic of pure extraction. External finance creates an energy system in the region while siphoning off the energy produced and the profits produced back to the European imperial core. This is a total maintenance of the neocolonial regime, a greenwashed, extractive regime. And Desert Tech eventually stalled amid costs and criticisms of its neocolonial character, but as these things do, as these tenacious little animals do, it re-emerged in 2020 as the Desert Tech Industrial Initiative, or DII, and curiously launched a hydrogen alliance for exporting hydrogen energy back to Europe. It's a real sort of whack-a-mole with this neocolonialism. Fucking many-headed hydra, you chop one head off and two more appear in its place. What I want to emphasise with this section is not that effective climate mitigation is somehow impossible without engaging in colonialism, which would be wildly depressing. And, despite it all, I still have some hope in my heart. It might be falling faster than planes out of American skies, but there's still some hope there. But rather, what's worth emphasising is that a truly just transition to a green economy has to focus on more than just ensuring workers in the global north are able to have jobs in this new green world. The just transition has to account for fundamentally rupturing international flows of private finance. It has to account for ending the extraction of resources, the extraction of value, and the extraction of energy from areas which have, for centuries, been subject to imperial domination. But I do also want to complicate this story slightly. As heuristically useful as crude campism is in communicating these basic ideas, the world isn't neatly broken up into the dominated and the dominant. And in fact, for many areas of the MENA region in particular, sub-imperial dynamics are really visible. So, while it's true that the general flow of global power emanates from the global north, there are eddies and cross-currents which can alter the flows in specific places and in specific ways. The MENA region as a whole plays a significant role in the global economy, especially as a key location for the maintenance of global fossil fuel capital. Global capital. I hate global capital. I'm going to stop saying that now. This has given Gulf states in the area an immense amount of power and allowed them to engage in their own sort of sub-imperial relations with other MENA states, creating dependency and siphoning off value for their own enrichment. For a really good demonstration of this, we only need to look at the profits of the Saudi National Oil Company, which in 2023 not only produced profits higher than the combined profits of Shell, BP, ExxonMobil and Chevron, but produced the highest profits of any company in the world in any business ever. Such immense profit rates obviously influence global flows of economic power and obviously have a huge impact on the sub-imperial politics of the region. One key way in which this growth in power of Gulf region oil producers impacts global North imperialism is through the energy security programs that we discussed earlier. The global North doesn't like being beholden to these Gulf economies for a number of reasons. So by diversifying their energy into renewables, they can attempt to break this power somewhat. And this is just one way that the sub-imperial oil production shapes the formation of green colonialism, not directly through control but through reaction. Although, as Hania argues in their essay in this book, the increase in power of these regions is directly connected to the global exporting of production to China as the workshop of the world. As China began ramping up commodity production for export to the global north, which is itself a reaction to the shift in global north to neoliberal consumerist economies rather than from production hubs themselves, the need for massive amounts of fossil fuel energy in China also increased. Between 2000 and 2019, China's oil demand increased from 6% of world demand to 14%, that's a massive increase. So what we've got is an increase in the power of sub-imperial regions being produced by the imperial dynamics emanating from the global north, which are then reflected back and influence the colonial dynamics of transition away from fossil fuels. What a tangled web we weave. And within this tangled production of green colonialism are features which uphold colonial dynamics internal to the MENA region. One really clear example of this is Morocco, which currently illegally occupies the region of Western Sahara. This occupation produces the same dynamics of settler colonialism that, we're all familiar with. Namely, the theft of land historically used by indigenous peoples for the benefits of the Moroccan settler state, and for the benefit of global north neocolonial regimes too. In fact, the Desert Tech initiative that we mentioned earlier was only made possible by the appropriation of indigenous lands in Western Sahara and through the theft of scarce water resources. This example shows just how deeply global neocolonialism facilitates continued regional colonialism and dispossession, all in the service to a green agenda which is largely motivated by European energy security. It's illustrative of a global project of greenwashing colonial domination. And nowhere greenwashes an occupation like Israel. Israel's narrative of making the desert bloom has been one of the key features of its colonial domination in Palestine.
The Bible tells us in the book of Isaiah, chapter 35, that when the Jewish people return to the land of Israel, that the desert will rejoice and flowers will bloom in the wilderness.
Like all colonial narratives, Zionism portrays Palestine as an historically empty land, ready to be properly mastered by the settler state. Never mind the constant theft of water from indigenous Palestinians or the destruction of Palestinian ecologies, all of which I discussed in detail in my video on ecocide in Palestine. Yet, Israel has also made a great deal of its technological advancements in green technology, which, with the support of its imperial partner, the USA, has been used as a means of securing its position within the MENA region. One key element of this has been what Manal Shakir calls eco-normalization. One example of this is the 2022 Normalization Pacts, Prosperity Blue and Prosperity Green, between Israel and Jordan and brokered by the UAE. This pact, or these pacts, has Jordan buying 200 million cubic meters of water from Israel every year. And water, by the way, is a resource Israel has consistently stolen from Palestinians and from Jordan. And in return for the water that Jordan is buying back, their own water that they're buying back, Jordan will establish a solar farm funded by the UAE. According to the terms of Prosperity Green, Jordan will sell Israel for $180 million per year all the electricity generated from the solar farm to be built on its land. Similar normalization patterns as this are present between Israel and Egypt, Qatar, Morocco, and of course the UAE as well. They show how apparent green energy projects aren't just used to greenwash Israeli occupation to the world.
Live weather update. in association with Israel, pioneering green technology for a better world.
But to implicate various states within the MENA region in networks of market dependence, leading to normalised relations with this genocidal settler state. For Palestinians, this means that the list of regional allies grows increasingly thin, and the power of the colonial occupier only increases. I think that the muted reaction from various supposed allies of the Palestinian people around the MENA region during this ramp up of genocidal action of the past couple of years is a real indicator of just how powerful these networks have become. And this is essential, I think, not just for the case of Palestinians, but for all world colonial dynamics. Greenwashing isn't just a propaganda campaign. It doesn't just exist on the level of discourse or ideology. Greenwashing is a method of embedding colonial and sometimes genocidal dynamics. Projects like Prosperity Green don't just obscure that Israel is selling back water it stole from Jordan in the first place, but is ensuring that it becomes harder and harder for Jordan and, for other MENA states to break from Israel's sub-imperial domination. It's securing the conditions for ongoing Palestinian genocide. Green colonialism is failing to properly transition us to a green economy. It can't account for the constant expansion of commodity production, leading to increased emissions and material throughput in the global economy. It also subordinates a rationally directed renewable energy policy under the rubrics of green energy security, colonial domination, and the quest for expanding profits. It fundamentally seeks to maintain the status quo, and in doing so, dominates oppressed classes across the world, leading to dispossession and to genocide. Clearly, we need to organise around an alternative to this. And, of course, any alternative to green colonialism will require organised mass movements within the imperial and sub-imperial cores to support the movement of the dispossessed in those neocolonially dominated regions. We need to be able to stop giant babies with inferiority complexes like Elon Musk from being able to coup whoever he wants. We in the imperial core also need to be able to generate renewable energy internally without relying on theft from the global south. But to get to this will require breaking from the current capitalist order. We need to end not only the unequal exchange of value between global north and global south, but the unequal exchange of ecological value. This doesn't mean, though, that there's nothing to be done till the revolution. Immediate action can be taken by global north states to disrupt green colonialism, which wouldn't require immediate transition to communism, as much as that would be nice and relaxing for me personally. Simple measures like global debt forgiveness would be immense. So would curtailing the power of global financial institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. These essential actors in perpetuating green colonialism simply need to be, and can be, disempowered and then abolished. That can happen very quickly and very easily without global communism. We didn't always have these things. Within global south states, energy production should be separated from international financial obligations and used to fuel and develop the internal economies of those states. But this doesn't necessarily mean just the state dictating the terms of energy production to citizens. As we've seen, many MENA states have colonial dynamics of their own. Western Sahara and Palestine need unconditional freedom. Green transitions should never serve colonial oppression and genocide. But even in non-strictly colonial relations, the state should work with local peoples to work on lower-level green energy productions to ensure as just a transition as possible. Such local energy production can be replicated within the global north. It doesn't just mean that we should immediately nationalise energy companies, which, to be clear, we absolutely should, but we should also be internally diversifying our green energy production. More local energy production initiatives, more local solar panels, local wind farms and things like that, things directed by the people living in an area. It doesn't have to be completely nationalisation. Overall though, I think that the only way to fully dismantle green colonialism is through the pursuit of a degrowth and communist agenda. Energy security in the global north is so essential under capitalist economics because our energy demands just keep increasing. Similarly, fossil fuel demands have increased so much in China because of the requirement to constantly increase commodity production for constantly increased consumer appetites. These dynamics are structurally required by capitalism and can't be overcome without fundamentally breaking with it. So we need a complete reconfiguration of global and local society, a good life beyond the consumption of endless commodities, a truly just transition. Dismantling green colonialism in the end means dismantling capitalism itself.
Alright, thanks for watching this video. I hope you all had a wonderful time learning about green colonialism. Isn't it great? If you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe, give it a share. I think there's a bell that you can still ring. I don't even know. I've not even looked at that for ages because I'm a professional. If you can, please sign up to my Patreon, or if you can't, give a one-off donation via PayPal or Ko-fi. $10 and up patrons get a bunch of benefits like Discord servers. They get their names read out, that I'll do in a second. $5 and up also get Discord server, and all patrons get early access to things like videos and some like screenshots, as well as a bunch of other writing that I've done. That's all up there. So if you want to do that, then fucking go for it. You know, you've only got one life, so why not sign up to a subscription service? Ah, that's grim. I hate what advertising does to me. Anyway, I'm going to read out the patron names now. And here they are. Demo Squid, Dying of Thirst, Sovel Hayes, Earl Grey Tea, Bonnie, Katie Marshall, Joshua Moldenhauer, Nina G Public Relations, FD Signifier, Quint Wolf, Kim Crawley, Anita Anisby, Ellis Wren S, Hey Joe, Cameron Blakemore, Jacob Quinn Schenker, Mason Colbert, Alex, Tim, Daniel Swing, Unoriginal Name, Rachel Ann, Melanie Estes, Layum, Xander Corbis, Fia Westphal, Jack, TB Skyen, Christopher Poff, Margussie, Tom Price, Kate Soiree, Esoteric Fictionalism, Austin Talman, Robin, Rachel Mixon, Duncan Skinner, Niels Abelgard, Tinfoil Pancakes, Kieran Gore, Aga Ghost, Barney Carroll, Joel, Daniel Hughes, Nelly Jacheva, J. Fraser Cartwright, Tamash Kispeter, Aaron, and Paul Singleton. Right, so yeah, thanks again, and if you like this video, again, like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon with another one. Bye, love you.